sent us as well, so. Just next door? Okay.
Alright, well, you got this.
Alrighty, man.
This is Daniel Krug, the man who murdered his wife. And this is him heading into work on December 12, 2022. Just minutes after leaving Crystal's lifeless body in their garage. For the last 4 months, this man engineered one of the most calculated murder plots Colorado has ever seen. He created fake identities, manipulated his wife's fear, and built the perfect scapegoat to take the fall. He believed his plan was bulletproof, and for a while, it almost worked. But before we uncover how he almost got away with it, if you're new to Crime 7, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We dive deep into the most shocking true crime cases with the analysis you won't find anywhere else. And if you're already part of the Crime 7 family, drop a comment and let me know what case you want covered next. Now, let's get into it. Crystal Krug was 43 years old, living in Broomfield, Colorado with her husband Daniel and their 3 children. From the outside, they seemed like any other suburban family. Both Crystal and Daniel were well-educated professionals who had built a comfortable life together. But behind closed doors, something sinister was unfolding that would shatter this family forever. It started in the fall of 2022. Crystal began receiving strange messages. Someone was watching her. Someone was following her, and whoever it was knew far too much about her daily routine, her family, and her life. Crystal was terrified, and she had every reason to be. By September, things escalated. Daniel reported a break-in at their home. An officer responded to the scene, and Daniel explained that he'd seen someone jump over their gate and run off. The only thing missing? Their spare house key. If someone had stolen that key, it meant they weren't done. They were planning to come back. The officer advised Daniel to change the locks immediately and promised to investigate. But what no one realized that night was that this wasn't a random break-in. It was the opening move in a plan that had been forming for months. And Daniel Krug was the one orchestrating it all. 9 days after the break-in, Crystal woke up to another unsettling morning. For weeks, she'd been getting anonymous threatening messages. But today, something changed. The stalker finally had a name. As Crystal was getting ready for her day, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and saw a name she hadn't thought about in over 20 years. Anthony Holland. He was someone she'd briefly dated as a teenager, and they hadn't spoken in decades. The message was crude and completely out of nowhere. "Hi Crystal, it's Anthony. Hope it's okay I looked you up. I go to Boulder every few weeks and thought we could hook up. You game?" At first, Crystal didn't think much of it. It was weird, sure, but Anthony had always been harmless, so she ignored it and moved on with her day. But the next day, everything changed. "Are you there? You should say yes when I offer." "Whatever. I saw your pics. You got fat. You should hurt yourself. Saw you at the dentist today. Your license plate expired. Got to fix that." Suddenly, Crystal's worst fears became reality. She was being watched. And now she was certain Anthony was the one who'd been harassing her for weeks. Crystal became hypervigilant. She installed security cameras around the house, dash cams in her car, and started carrying a concealed handgun everywhere she went. She even created a spreadsheet to document every single message and threat she received, keeping a detailed stalker log. By late October, Crystal was barely sleeping. Then, almost a month later, a new email from Anthony confirmed her worst nightmare. "Is this your husband? Drives like a slow old lady. He needs to drive safe." The email came with an attached photo showing her husband Daniel at his workplace. Now the stalker wasn't just targeting Crystal. He was coming after her entire family. Crystal realized she couldn't handle this alone. She hired a private investigator to track down Anthony's addresses and digital history. Then on Halloween night, she called the police. An officer took her report and forwarded the case to the department's investigative unit. Within hours, the file landed on the desk of Detective Andrew Martinez, a seasoned investigator who'd worked some of Broomfield's toughest cases. Martinez scheduled a formal meeting with Crystal for the following week, hoping to get a clearer picture of who this Anthony really was. When Crystal sat down with him, the situation had already escalated far beyond what she first reported. She explained how Anthony had found old photos of her family and children on social media, how he'd said things like, "We're meant to be together," and "My family loves that we're talking." When Crystal shut him down hard and told him to stop, he got emotional, then blocked her. She thought it was over. But clearly, it wasn't. Crystal handed Martinez the full report from her private investigator. The findings were concerning. Anthony Holland was tied to multiple phone numbers and several addresses across 3 different states. He moved constantly, almost like he was trying to stay off the grid. Detective Martinez sent out warrants to service providers, requesting phone records, email logs, and account information to track down the stalker. But unfortunately, the companies would make mistakes processing these requests, mistakes that would soon prove deadly. While waiting for the digital evidence to come back, Martinez decided to follow up on something else. The garage break-in Daniel reported back in September. He brought Daniel in for a formal interview, wanting to know if he'd noticed anyone following him. But instead of clarifying things, Martinez was about to learn something far more unsettling about the Krug household. Daniel explained that Crystal didn't tell him about the stalking for almost a month, not until she received the email with the photo taken outside his workplace. When Martinez asked why there was such a delay, Daniel revealed something unexpected. "I'm sure she hasn't mentioned to you that she and I are going through a rough patch, kind of on the rocks, so it probably didn't seem that pressing until I was in the picture. And she didn't mention that to me." Martinez was caught off guard. Crystal hadn't mentioned any marital problems. Daniel went on to explain that his brother Matthew was a cop, so he'd armed himself with a retractable steel baton that he kept with him at all times. He'd also bought additional security cameras for the house. "So what am I doing? I'm panicking and I'm doing a terrible job of protecting my wife. I'm not doing good," Daniel said, visibly distressed. From Daniel's reactions, it was clear the stalking was taking a toll on him too. His wife was terrified, his family felt haunted, and he was struggling to understand how any of this was happening. This case gets even more twisted from here. If you're enjoying this deep dive, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more cases like this. Alright, let's continue. Detective Martinez wrapped up the interview, but something Daniel said lingered in the back of his mind. The couple had been going through a rough patch. Nothing hostile or dangerous, but they were trying to work things out for the sake of their kids. For a brief moment, Martinez even considered the possibility that Daniel might be messing with his wife as some twisted way of trying to fix their marriage. But that idea was quickly dismissed. There was no evidence backing any of it, and all signs still pointed to Anthony Holland. Not to mention, Crystal herself was fully convinced her ex was behind the stalking campaign. Throughout November, the harassment continued to escalate with more messages and more threats. Crystal kept documenting everything and constantly monitored her security cameras. By early December, she finally received a message that gave her the smallest breath of relief. "Hey gorgeous, I can't visit you anymore. No more Colorado time. My girlfriend doesn't want us talking without her. She says you'll let the cops get me after you get rid of him." For the first time in weeks, Crystal and her family felt a brief sense of safety. It sounded like Anthony was backing off, maybe even leaving the state for good. But in reality, this was just the stalker's final move to make them drop their guard before he struck. The day started like every other day. Daniel left for work while Crystal headed out to drop the kids off at school. During those minutes when the house was empty, someone approached the front door, taped over the Ring doorbell camera, and slipped inside. Minutes later, Crystal drove back home and pulled into the garage. She had no idea someone was waiting for her inside. The moment she closed her car door, he attacked. The stalker struck Crystal in the head, stabbed her in the chest, and left her bleeding on the garage floor. After months of plotting, this was the moment he'd been waiting for. Later that morning, Daniel tried calling Crystal from his office, but she didn't answer. He sent text messages, still no response. Hours passed, and there was still no sign of her. Finally, Daniel decided to call the police. "Hi there, my name is Dan Krug. I don't think this is an emergency, but this feels really weird. My wife isn't responding to text messages or phone calls. We've had threats against us. We've both been targeted by a stalker. Threats have been made against my life and threatening to kidnap her, which is why I'm nervous that she's not answering me." Within minutes, an officer was dispatched to the Krug residence to check on Crystal. At the same time, Daniel also called Crystal's mother, asking her to go check on her daughter. The officer arrived first. The house looked quiet from the outside, and nothing seemed out of place. But before he cleared the call and drove off, something nagged at him. So he brought his patrol car a little closer to check the garage. And that's when he saw it. A body lying on the floor, motionless, with blood smeared across the wall. The officer immediately radioed for medical assistance and rushed into the garage. He found Crystal with a severe head injury and immediately began performing CPR. He worked on her for several minutes with no success, then opened the garage door to give medics access. But instead of paramedics arriving first, someone else showed up. Crystal's mother, Linda. As the garage door lifted, Linda caught a brief glimpse inside, just long enough to see an officer performing CPR on her daughter. Before she could process what she was seeing, another officer quickly arrived to shield her from the nightmare unfolding before her eyes. Medics continued working on Crystal inside the garage while an officer stood outside, trying to reassure Linda. She was shaken, terrified by what she'd just witnessed. Linda would later learn that none of this was random. And finding her daughter like this was always part of a twisted plan. Back inside the garage, medics kept working, still trying to revive Crystal. Then one of them noticed something beneath her clothing. "Guys, you seen anything other than a fall-type wound? Look at that. What's that? Gash on the chest. Oh no, yeah, that's a stab there. She's got a visible stab wound right above her heart." Medics worked for only a few more minutes before realizing there was nothing more they could do. Crystal Krug was gone. Beside her body, tucked inside her purse, officers found the handgun she carried everywhere. She never even had time to reach for it. With the immediate area secure, officers spread out throughout the house, searching every room for the attacker, but no one was inside. And as officers stepped outside the home, they started noticing small details that didn't line up with an impulsive crime. The Ring doorbell had been taped over. The attack had clearly been planned. And the stalker, Anthony Holland, had been sending threats for months, building up to this exact moment. Detective Martinez arrived on scene and immediately took over the investigation. He knew this case inside and out. He'd been tracking Anthony Holland for weeks, waiting for warrants to come back, trying to piece together where this man was and how he kept finding Crystal. But as Martinez dug deeper into the digital evidence, something didn't add up. The phone numbers Anthony used to contact Crystal, the email accounts, the IP addresses, they were all over the place. But when forensic analysts started tracing them back to their origins, they all led to the same place. They led back to Daniel Krug. Every single threatening message, every email, every text, every photo. It was all Daniel. He'd created the fake identity of Anthony Holland. He'd sent himself and his wife on a wild goose chase, manipulating Crystal's fear and building a phantom stalker that didn't exist. Daniel had researched Anthony Holland, Crystal's real ex-boyfriend from decades ago, and used his name and details to make the stalker seem legitimate. He'd even used burner phones and VPNs to mask his digital footprint. But he made mistakes, small mistakes that forensic investigators were able to trace back to him. Daniel Krug had spent 4 months terrorizing his own wife, making her believe she was being hunted by a dangerous stalker. He manipulated her fear, isolated her, and convinced everyone around them, including the police, that Anthony Holland was real. And on December 12, 2022, Daniel Krug murdered his wife in cold blood, hoping investigators would spend weeks chasing a ghost while he walked free. But his plan failed. Daniel Krug was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During the trial, prosecutors laid out the disturbing details of his months-long plot. They showed how he created fake identities, how he manipulated digital evidence, and how he staged the entire stalking campaign to frame an innocent man. The jury heard how Daniel had taped over the Ring doorbell camera the morning of the murder, how he attacked Crystal the moment she returned home from dropping the kids off at school, how he then calmly drove to work and waited hours before calling the police, pretending to be a concerned husband. Daniel Krug was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Crystal's family was left devastated. Her 3 children lost their mother. Linda lost her daughter. And all of it was orchestrated by the one person Crystal should have been able to trust most, her own husband. This case is a chilling reminder of how far someone will go when they believe they can commit the perfect crime. If this case shocked you as much as it shocked me, leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Crime 7 for more deep dives into the darkest true crime cases. I'll see you in the next one.